Alright guys, first little project of the Jeep here, we're going to be replacing the oil pan gasket. I've had some oil leaks and it's really bad when I run the Jeep for a while, get it up to operating temperature, and then it sits outside, gets really cold, and that gasket contracts and it starts leaking real bad. So um, got the gasket here from Pro. You can get it from any auto parts store. Looks like a pretty well built gasket. Get up underneath the Jeep here, let's take a look. Of course, you're going to want to drain your oil is the first biggest thing. Get that drained out. And then the first thing you're going to want to do is take out these 15mm bolts from the dust cover on your transmission. There's 7 bolts, 4 that bolt into the transmission housing, 3 that face up and bolt into the oil pan. So as you can see, it's pretty nasty. Once you get those off, you're going to want to take these bolts up here out. Those are what are going to come out. 10mm bolts, and there are 16 of them, I believe. So get this dust cover off first, get these bolts out, and once we get those out, we'll take the oil pan here, clean it up real good, put some degreaser on it, look up into our crankcase, see if there's anything going on, and so we'll do that first. All right, there's the dust cover for the transmission. As you can see, it's pretty grimy. It's the first time I've had it off. That's what it looks like. See, I'll have to do a lot of cleaning. So we'll get that cleaned up, and the next thing is we'll get these 10mm bolts off of the oil pan. All right, we've dropped the oil pan. There it is. It's pretty grimy and nasty. A lot of sand up in there, a lot of dirt and everything. So there's your crankcase. Everything in the crankcase is looking pretty good. So your next step is just to what you want to do is clean your oil pan, and you want to get this old gasket off there. So take a scraper, you want to pop that off, scrape the bottom of your oil pan right there really good, spray some degreaser on it, get that clean, get your transmission housing real clean. So that'll be our next step, is just putting a good cleaning on everything. All right, here we go. There's our oil pan all cleaned up. Got the old oil and RTV off of it. There's the transmission dust housing. That thing had a lot of dirt and grime up in it, so we got that cleaned off. So the next thing will be putting our pan back on, and then we'll put the dust cover back on. Here's a note: when you put the dust cover back on, you want to put the there's a certain pattern on the bolts you want to do, and we'll go over that here in a minute. All right, so looking up underneath here, there's a couple of notes. There's 4 places you want to put a little dab of RTV. You're going to put it in both of these corners right here, and then if you can see where the creases are, right there and right there. You're going to put just a little dab of RTV. And again, up in these corners right here, I'm going to put just a little bead of it. Just going to keep that gasket sealed in. Okay, now we're going to put our gasket on. Most of the gasket manufacturers will come with these little pins right there that you can see. What you do is you just screw them up into the holes. There's 4 of them. You put them on each corner, and what you can do is you can just pop the gasket in right over the top of them like that. You can see that. It just pops in what it does is it just holds your gasket in place for you. And then you can also put your oil pan in right over the top of those too. And then you can secure your bolts and then just take those out and put your 4 bolts in where those go. So you can see right there, your oil pan will just pop right over the top of those little pins too. It's kind of nice. Keeps it in place, up out of the way while you put your other bolts in. So now you just want to secure your 10mm bolts back in. I do just a hand tighten for now, and then we'll go back with a torque wrench and get it to our torque specs. All right, so we've gone around and checked all of our bolts. All of them are tightened to 105 foot-pounds of torque. You can see the new blue pan gasket just sticking out, just barely. So the next thing we're gonna do is put our transmission dust cover back on now. Okay, so I told you there's a specific pattern to tightening your dust cover onto your transmission housing. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna put your dust cover back in place. You're gonna put your 3 bolts connecting your dust cover to your oil pan, those guys right there. Put those bolts in and just tighten it a half turn or so, just enough to keep it in place. Then you're gonna do the same thing with your 4 bolts here that connect your dust pan to your transmission housing. Just put those 4 bolts in and just a little half crank just to keep them tight. So then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your outside 2 bolts right here and right here that connect your dust cover to your transmission housing, and you're gonna tighten them to 40 foot-pounds. Okay, so that one and that one to 40 foot-pounds. Then you're gonna come back in and you're gonna tighten your 3 bolts to your oil pan to 40 foot-pounds. And then lastly, you'll tighten in your 2 bottom on your transmission housing to 40 foot-pounds. All right, so there we go. We have our 7 bolts of our transmission dust cover back into place. Again, tightened to 40 pounds of foot torque with that pattern we talked about before. So there's those. All of our bolts are back in place. So now you want to make sure you put your oil plug back in. And once we do that, we'll put our 6 quarts of oil in, and hopefully that'll be that.